there is the federal borrowing limit. And this is something that the Democrats should have gotten rid of a long time ago, because the Republicans keep doing this. Every now and then you'll get a member of one party or the other, the opposition party, who will vote against raising the debt limit for one reason or another. In this instance, the Republicans are basically they're going to completely prevent the debt ceiling from being raised, because you need a majority to raise it, and you need more than a majority. I think they're basically going to try and stop. So what's happening is, Democrats announced today that they're going to do both the federal borrowing limit, raise it to the end of 2022, onto a bill to keep the government funded through December, which is the continuing resolution. Meanwhile, they're trying to get through their reconciliation budget bill.
It buys them more time. It buys them more time on the debt ceiling.
And but Republicans said that they're not going to support raising the debt ceiling, and it is unlikely the two will pass. And the idea with the Democrats is they're trying to combine the two to put pressure on the Republicans, but they're not. It doesn't look like it's going to pass.
Well, they say that, right? I mean, McConnell kind of postures that when he's done this before, and like, is he going to let the economy crash? Maybe. Well, maybe. So
far, there's only one Republican, John Kennedy of Louisiana, who said he would support the measure. The real problem, of course, is the Senate here. And he said, I will likely vote yes, but it's not going to pass because there won't be 10 Republican votes. Now, that indicates that the Republicans are not just not voting for it. They are, in fact, filibustering it, and they're not going to allow it to pass.
Which is my point, though, is that it's that the political ramifications for that, for them, might be too much to bear when it comes down to brass tacks.
Yeah.
To filibuster it and say, oh, we're just going to shut down the government. I mean, that's going to come back to bite them, as it usually does.
And so now, in the event that they do not pass this legislation, there's only 10 days before the government funding is set to lapse. If you do not approve an increase in the debt limit, the government could default on its debt for the first time. Now, look, whenever they give a date for the debt limit to hit, basically the funds in Treasury to run out, Treasury always seems to be able to figure out a way of extending that by another couple of weeks. There's also other mechanisms. The Treasury has the ability to mint. And we haven't heard this yet, but maybe
mint the coin.
Mint the, I think it's the platinum coin. They have the ability to mint a coin in the amount of whatever they want. And
$1 trillion coin, baby.
They could theoretically do that. So there are mechanisms for this. But you also need to have a continuing resolution so that government does not shut down. There is apparently, at least no Democrat is talking about a plan B for these two things. However, there is a way in which you could pass these two bills, and that is through reconciliation. However, the way that reconciliation works, which is the only mechanism to pass something with that is not subject to the filibuster. So you can pass it with 51 votes.
And it's pertaining to the budget, so this would fall under that.
It must pertain to the budget. However, the way that reconciliation works is that you first must pass a budget resolution, which gives the broad parameters for the what will be in that reconciliation bill. So the reconciliation bill is really an aggregate of a bunch of different acts. And so when you write the budget resolution language, you could say you can borrow up to $1.7 trillion, which is what they did in this one. You could say you can't borrow anything. But they just create a framework. Why did they choose $1.7 trillion? I do not know.
But you create the framework, then move forward with the bill writing process within sticking to that framework, at least loosely.
Exactly. However, the raising of the debt ceiling and the continuing resolution are not written into that budget resolution. However, there is apparently a way in which you can amend the budget resolution. However, if you do that, you need to open up all sorts of amendments to it. Now, you remember when they did the first budget resolution, they had the vote-a-rama.
Yes.
And that allows anybody on the floor to raise amendments that they want in the bill.
They stay up all night. They throw everything at the wall. A lot of it's for their campaigns. And
right. A lot of it is to try and get, to create wedge issues. At one point, I can't remember what it was that...
Josh Hawley put up something ridiculous.
Can't teach
critical race theory,
whatever it is.
Yeah.
For some reason, and I'm not going to lie, I don't fully understand why, to rewrite the budget resolution to include both these in, and maybe it's because you're talking about two separate distinct bills. One is the continuing resolution and one is the debt ceiling. You need to have two vote-a-ramas. So 2 nights of all night.
Drink
voting.
all that Red Bull.
Exactly. And
Chuck
so
Schumer.
It is doable. Now, the advantage of doing that to the Democrats, aside from everybody having to stay up late, and there's a ton of older Democratic senators.
I wasn't aware of that.
And is that if you put the raising of the debt ceiling and the continuing resolution within the budget bill, it becomes a lot more important for someone like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to vote for, because if they vote against it, they are voting to shut down the government. And that means that people will be furloughed. That means that people will lose services. It is a very uncomfortable thing to be responsible for, particularly in this instance when it would be like one or two of you.
However, this would extend the infrastructure fight to end of year.
This is the other sort of deadline that they're facing. Yes, I know. This is like that thing with the good news is, and then the guy falls into like a haystack, but the bad news is there was a pitchfork in there, and then the good news is that the pitchfork was bent, that type of thing.
Yeah. Right.
Several weeks ago, maybe it was a month or two ago, Nancy Pelosi agreed to a crew of, I think it was 9 corporate Democrats who, because they want things like tax breaks for wealthy people in blue states, the SALT deductions, and maybe other things, Pelosi agreed to vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill by September 27th.
6 days from today.
6 days from today. The Progressive Caucus had said, we are not going to vote for the bipartisan bill until we vote for the reconciliation bill, because if we do, and we pass the bipartisan bill, these corporate Democrats will then sink the reconciliation bill because they don't care about that and they don't want the taxes to be raised and they don't want these other services. And we're talking about maybe 9 to 12 of these people, maybe it's really just 6 who would really vote against it. Maybe just 3, because that's all you really need, 3 or 4 in the House. And then, of course, 2 in the Senate. That's Manchin and Sinema, the ones who are squawking at that. But that, and we mentioned this yesterday in the fun half of the program, because it's so fun, the corporate Democrats threatened to vote against the reconciliation bill if the bipartisan bill is not voted on by the 27th.
Which is not going to happen. Or if it does, it'll fail.
But the bottom line is, the reason why they are insisting on the bipartisan bill to be voted on the 27th is so that they are freed up to vote against the reconciliation bill. So threatening to vote against the reconciliation bill, if they're not given the opportunity to vote against the reconciliation bill, is not a threat. You're pushing against a string there. So they're about to lose that fight, I think. Because there is no way at this point, even if they wanted to, that they're going to get this reconciliation bill.
So you think that the House conservative Democrats, at the very least, are kind of puffer fishing it? They don't really have anything behind their threat. They seem pretty serious, but the block of progressive Democrats being, close to 50, over
there are
40.
at least 17, to my knowledge, who have publicly.
But Jayapal says half her 96-person caucus in the Progressive Caucus is going to do this. So.
But the 17 is enough because we also now know that there are no Republicans who are planning to vote for the bipartisan bill. So sometime over the next 10 days, I don't know how they get past this. I really don't know how they work it out. It doesn't sound like they have a grand plan either.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know why this keeps happening to Pelosi and Schumer. If you recall, back in 2017, they came in, and when Republicans faced this type of cliff, they just delivered them the votes. The Democrats did, and then went on to say, okay, let's now negotiate. And that's why we ended up getting those Republican tax cuts, because when Republicans face this kind of pressure, Pelosi and Schumer let them off the hook. They provided the votes to raise the debt ceiling. They provided the votes for the continuing resolution.
Well, they have less leash with corporate donors, and they don't want to be seen as the ones that tank the economy. Republicans are like, we're really the guys that are going to look out for your interests, so we can, play with fire all we want.
I mean, arguably, but it's also just maybe they're just bad tacticians.
There's that too. But the incentive structure also makes them bad tacticians for our purposes. Maybe not,
right.
Exactly what they are looking out for.
I mean, make no mistake about it. This is not, and you can be cynical all you want. This is not where the White House wanted it to be, nor Pelosi or Schumer. They did not want this to be in jeopardy, this $3.5 trillion bill. And now Nancy Pelosi sent out a letter, a Dear Colleagues letter, last night, apparently. And it essentially said, that the differences between the House and the Senate Democrats aren't as wide as many rank-and-file lawmakers believe. This is from the Punch Bowl News. But she also had carefully worded warning to her progressive to be prepared to be disappointed by the Senate. In other words, the Senate's going to pass something at one point, and it may not be as big as you want it. She said, hopefully, there's a quote, that will be the... That will be at the $3.5 trillion number. She's starting to speak of the $3.5 trillion number as a cap, as opposed to a goal.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense.
Well, yes, because they're backing off. She's starting to sort of try and reset expectations. The question is, what will get cut? And there's two ways. I think we had, was it David Dayen on a couple of weeks ago to talk about the two different ways that this could go down if they cut down on that number. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you've got 10 plans and you want to fully fund them. That's the $3.5 trillion number. You have a choice. Do you go down to 7 plans and fund them with $2.5 trillion? Or do you try and fund them all less than they really need to be funded to function properly, so that you maintain 10 plans, but you underfund all of them?
I have my fears about part one, because with Manchin getting the reward on energy and commerce in the Senate on that committee, or is it just the energy committee in the Senate? He's going to want to cut the climate provisions right away. And that's...
Without
necessary.
a doubt. And we know Sinema has trained her sights on the prescription drug bill. Now, that is the centerpiece of this, one of the centerpieces of this bill, because it not only lowers prescription drug prices, which is a desperately needed thing, but it also provides savings to the government, because it's Medicare negotiating these things, to the tune of something like $600 billion. $700 billion, which could then be deployed to fund other things.
It's a pay for. You're supposed to love that. Sinema
Well,
and Kathleen Rice.
exactly.
Right? That's the kind of Democrat they want to be. And look at that. Looks like farmers' interests get a little bit more weight.
And meanwhile, we should also say that the attempts to get some type of immigration reform are, I want to say they're being stymied, but that's really not accurate. The Democrats are choosing to allow that to be stymied. The parliamentarian has ruled that it does not belong in the reconciliation bill. Aside from the parliamentarian being a former immigration attorney who used to help deport people back in the day.
Not a Ronald Reagan flavor immigration attorney.
The bottom line is that certainly as recently as 20 years, I remember the George Bush fired the parliamentarian, or I should say that the Senate did at the time, the Republican-controlled Senate, fired the parliamentarian because the parliamentarian was ruling in a way they didn't like. And it's not really even a ruling. It is an advisory opinion. There is no constitutional authority that the parliamentarian has. The parliamentarian serves at the will of the president of the Senate, which in this instance is Kamala Harris, and they can be fired. They have been fired for having a different perspective on what is allowed than the party deems fit. This is a choice. This is a choice.
We could just get rid of the parliamentarian entirely, couldn't we? And just have this be a responsibility of, say, Kamala Harris right now.
Or a responsibility of the 100 elected senators to make a determination independent of a parliamentarian.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we don't need more institutional obstacles to direct democracy in the Senate, but that's what that serves.
You could just have it be an aide. Like, I mean, someone, who can give an opinion on it, but it doesn't, it is, I don't even know what function it serves to have a parliamentarian at this point.
I just said it.
Yeah, I guess that's it. And so, but the bottom line is that parliamentarian can be fired. That parliamentarian can be overruled. I mean, the reason why they fire the parliamentarian is because they don't want the political cudgel of a ruling to be out there, which, of course, I think is an archaic vision of politics in this country. Yeah. Right? I mean, honestly, like, there was a time where the parties were much more aligned, and I'm thinking like the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, where there was a tremendous amount of bipartisanship, where the idea of norms were elevated because there was really no dramatic discrepancy in the policy choices of the different parties. I mean, we've had people on this program who've written books on this, that there were complaints at the time that there wasn't really sufficient choice between the two parties, which is also, rather stunning when you look at how much corporate money has now sort of overtaken both parties. That is a phenomena that is really an innovation that took place in the late 80s as far as the Democrats. But the idea that the voting public cares about the parliamentarian versus immigration reform, the idea that the voting public cares about the parliamentarian versus, say, $15 minimum wage, is absurd.
Maybe we should just tell the Democrats that the parliamentarian's job has become obsolete due to automation, and now they can get rid of her.
There you go.
Get rid of the position altogether. That seems to be an argument that appeals to them.
But like the Title 42 thing, this is because they're basically caving to Stephen Miller.
That's, I think, ultimately what it is. They don't want the narrative of, they're willing to do immigration reform unless it sticks out too much. And their fear, just like these deportation and the Title 42, their fear is that they're going to draw too much attention to this question of immigration. And I don't know that they have polling to back this up. It seems to me to be the bottom line is, if you are keeping, 40% of children off of poverty. It is necessary but insufficient, which that earned income tax credit has been doing, or I should say the child tax credit has been doing, among other programs. If you are providing material benefit to people, it is going to far outweigh the agitation by people who are already voting against you, the xenophobes in the Republican Party. I mean, they have been activated. They are not going away, but they're also not. You're not going to create more of them. This is how. This is a mainstay of them, and the idea. Despite how often, Laura Ingraham gets on and says it. I think we even have a clip of Laura Ingraham talking about this in terms of the Afghan, the refugees. It's not going to make a difference. They're there already. Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.